The red pickup slammed sideways across both lanes of the overpass tires, screaming against concrete. Luke Harper's hands were slick on the wheel, blood soaking through the sleeve of his faded work jacket. In the passenger seat, a woman he'd met only 3 days ago clutched a small metal key drive to her chest, like it was the last piece of her soul. Behind them, headlights surged closer, 2 black trucks' engines roaring, gaining ground with every second. Up ahead, traffic was at a dead stop, horns blaring, people standing outside their cars, filming with their phones, thinking this was just another road rage incident. They had no idea. A bullet punched through the rear window, spraying glass across the dashboard. "Don't let them take it," the woman rasped, voice shaking. "If they get this back, all of those families, all those kids, it's like they never existed." Another shot cracked the mirror away. Luke's mind did what it always did under fire, went calm, cold, precise. He jammed the truck into reverse, spun it toward the concrete barrier, and glanced at the glowing phone wedged in the cup holder. The upload bar was at 78%. Before I go any further, tell me where you're listening from tonight, and hit that like and subscribe button if you believe courage still matters in this world. Luke Harper was not supposed to be the kind of man who ended up in a rolling gunfight on an Indiana overpass. Most mornings, he was just the guy in the Navy work shirt at the city bus depot in Riverbend, a river town an hour outside Cincinnati, where the Ohio rolled slow and brown, and the steel mill whistle still blew at 6 a.m. At 38, he lived in a rented brick duplex on a dead-end street, his world measured in oil changes, brake lines, and making sure his 9-year-old daughter Mia got to school with her homework done and her curls brushed. Luke had done his time in a different life. Army combat engineer convoy security, the kind of job that taught you how to see patterns in chaos and how fast things could go wrong. When his wife died 5 years earlier, after a routine surgery went sideways, he folded that past up tight and shoved it in a mental footlocker. He quit bouncing around contract gigs, took the first steady job he could find at the Transit Authority, and wrapped his life around one promise: Mia would grow up in a world that felt steady, even if he didn't. He kept his rules simple. Tell the truth, even when it hurt. Never raise your hand in anger. And if someone's in trouble in front of you, you don't look away. Riverbend was the kind of town where people knew each other's trucks, where the church parking lot doubled as a farmer's market on Saturdays, and where the big new glass building on the hill felt like something from another planet. That building belonged to Meridian Care Systems, a health tech company that had moved in 2 years ago with promises of jobs, charity clinics, and revolutionary data-driven care. Luke didn't follow corporate news. He just noticed the suits at the coffee shop and the out-of-state plates at the hotel. What he did follow were hospital bills, and he knew exactly how fast one bad diagnosis could sink a family. Most evenings after finishing the late shift, he'd pick up Mia from his sister's place, let her chatter about science projects and soccer practice, then fall asleep in his recliner with the TV on low. Life was small, heavy, and mostly predictable. Until the Tuesday night, he stopped at the all-night grocery on the edge of town and saw a stranger in a business skirt and mud-stained sneakers standing barefoot in the fluorescent light, clutching a prepaid phone with white knuckles. Her blazer was ripped. There was dried blood on her collar, and when their eyes met over a row of cereal boxes, she didn't ask for help. She whispered, "If anyone asks, you didn't see me," and slipped something cold and metallic into the pocket of his work jacket before walking out the side door into the dark. That was the moment Luke's carefully quiet life cracked open. He sat at the kitchen table after Mia went to bed, the little metal drive the stranger had slipped into his jacket resting between his calloused fingers. Every few seconds, he felt the urge to call someone, his sister, his old army buddy, even the non-emergency police line, but the warning in the woman's eyes kept echoing in his head. If anyone asks, you didn't see me. He stayed awake until dawn, staring at the drive like it might start talking. By sunrise, he'd convinced himself it was probably nothing. Maybe stolen office files, maybe someone else's drama. And he had no business getting involved, not with a daughter who needed him, not with a job that kept their lights on. So the next morning, Luke did the only thing that felt safe. He shoved the drive deep into his toolbox, turned the lock, and went to work. At the Riverbend Transit Authority garage, men were already shouting across the concrete bay, the sound of impact wrenches echoing like gunfire. It was familiar chaos, busted fuel pumps, buses overdue for inspection supervisors barking about budget cuts. Normally, Luke just kept his head down and fixed what was in front of him. But today, everything felt tilted. Harper, a voice snapped sharp as gravel. It was Supervisor Dan Laramie, a round man with a permanent scowl etched into his face, and a way of speaking that made every sentence sound like an accusation. "You're late." "I'm 5 minutes early," Luke said quietly. "Don't get smart with me. I need you on Bay 3. That hybrid bus from Route 7 threw another sensor. Luke nodded and started toward the bay. Harper Laramie called again. He stopped. "You look rough. Everything stable at home?" There was a tone in the question, a prying one, a judgment tucked just under concern. Luke forced a calm smile. "We're fine." Laramie replied, unconvinced. "Well, try not to bring personal drama in here. We need reliable workers." The word stung more than Luke wanted to admit. Reliable workers. He'd spent years clawing back stability after his wife's death, and the only thing he wanted less than trouble was someone hinting that he might be coming apart. He bit his tongue and kept walking. Mid-morning, he ducked outside to call and check on Mia. She answered in a whisper. "Dad." Someone was parked across from the playground at recess. His stomach tightened. "Did they talk to you?" "No. Just staring at everyone." "Mrs. Hendricks told us to stay close." "I didn't like it." He tried to keep his own voice steady. "You did the right thing telling me. I'll pick you up right after the last bell, okay?" "Okay." He hung up and stood still for a long moment, listening to the hum of the highway and the far-off clang of the rail yard. Riverbend was small, lower-middle class, the kind of place that didn't attract big-city criminals or corporate spies. But the memory of that woman's ripped blazer, the dried blood, the terror, those things didn't fit anywhere normal. He scraped a hand over his jaw and went back inside. By noon, the heat of the garage hung thick enough to taste, and Luke was halfway through replacing a sensor array when two men in charcoal suits stepped into the bay. They looked wrong, immediately polished shoes on concrete floors, expensive watches beneath starched cuffs, eyes that moved too quickly. Laramie spotted them first. "Gentlemen, garage tours are Tuesdays. You need admin for..." "We're looking for a technician named Luke Harper," the taller man said. His voice was pleasant, rehearsed. Laramie blinked. "About what?" "It's a private matter." "Yeah. Well, he's on the clock, state rules say." But the second man was already scanning the name tags on the uniforms. Luke froze behind the open hood of the bus. The taller man spotted him and smiled. "There he is." A coil of cold slid down Luke's spine. He stepped out slowly, wiping his hands on a rag. "Something I can help you with. Just need a word," the first man said. "Won't take long." Laramie puffed up. "Whatever business you have, it goes through me. My guys don't leave their posts without approval." The man's smile thinned. "We won't keep him. We just need to ask about a missing employee from Meridian Care Systems." Luke felt the entire garage shift its attention. Missing, he repeated carefully. Quite possibly in distress, the man said, glancing briefly around. We were told she may have approached random members of the public. Luke didn't blink. Haven't seen anyone like that. The second man tilted his head. You sure blonde woman? Business attire? Might have been confused. Lots of people in this town, Luke said quietly. I don't keep track of strangers. Laramie crossed his arms. You heard him. He said he hasn't seen anyone. So unless you've got a warrant or you're here about a bus, the taller man cut him off. No warrant needed for a welfare check. But thank you for your cooperation. They left without another word. Laramie waited until they were out of sight, then turned on Luke with an incredulous snort. What the hell was that? You withholding something? No. You better not be. We can't afford your side projects. I said no. Dan. Watch your tone. Harper, I'm serious. Luke stared at him, something brittle tightening in his chest. He didn't owe explanations not to a supervisor who'd never cared one bit about his life outside the garage, not to two strangers who seemed too eager to find a woman who clearly didn't want to be found. Still, the damage was done. For the rest of the shift, Luke caught co-workers giving him odd looks. He heard whispers. Those suits talked to Harper. Maybe he's in trouble again, you know how veterans get. That one cut deepest. He finished the day in silence, the mistreatment sliding across him like grit in a gear, harmless at first, until it built into something grinding and painful. When he got to the school pickup line, Mia climbed into the truck with her shoulders tight and her eyes darting. Dad. That same car was parked near the fence after school, too. Luke checked the mirror. A maroon sedan sat half a block away, engine idling. He forced calm into his voice. Seatbelt on, sweetheart. She obeyed instantly. He pulled away from the curb, slowly watching the sedan begin to follow. Riverbend's streets were predictable, straight flat lined with small houses and the occasional diner glowing with neon. As Luke wound through the familiar grid, the sedan kept pace, pausing when he paused, turning when he turned. Dad, Mia whispered, are we in trouble? The fear in her voice shattered something inside him. No, he said softly. But someone thinks we know something we don't. That's all. Is it about the lady from the store? He glanced over in shock. You saw her. You froze when she talked to you. Everybody can see when you freeze, like your brain is doing the math. He tried to smile. You're too smart for your own good. Dad, are we safe? As long as I'm breathing, he promised. But safety was feeling thinner by the hour. He took a deliberately winding path home. The sedan eventually peeled off near the highway, but the knot in Luke's stomach stayed. He parked, ushered Mia inside, locked the doors, and kept the living room lights off. After she fell asleep on the couch watching cartoons, he finally opened his toolbox. He stared at the locked drawer for a long moment. Then he turned the key. The drive sat where he'd left it. He picked it up and felt the weight of something enormous responsibility, danger truth, pressing at the edges. Before he could decide what to do, there was a knock at the front door. 3 sharp raps. He froze. No one knocked like that in Riverbend. Not after dark, not without calling first. He stepped to the window, keeping low. A silhouette stood on the porch. Tall, hands clasped. Not the woman. Not a neighbor. A stranger. Dad. Mia said sleepily behind him, rubbing her eyes. Who's here? He crouched, put a finger to her lips, and whispered, Go to your room. Now. Her eyes widened at the seriousness in his voice. She obeyed. The knocking came again, louder this time. Luke's heartbeat pounded in his ears as he moved to the hallway, the drive clutched in his palm. The house felt too small, too fragile, too exposed. The stranger outside shifted their weight. Luke backed away from the door and grabbed the only thing he could reach, a heavy wrench from the entryway toolbox. The stranger leaned close to the glass. "Luke Harper," a voice called calmly. "We need to talk." Luke's breath stopped. Not because of the voice, but because the porch light caught the man's face just enough for him to recognize the emblem on the jacket. Not corporate, federal, but something in the man's posture, too tight, too watchful, told Luke he couldn't trust that either. Pressure was building, fear tightening, choices closing one by one. The man knocked again, the sound echoing through the quiet house. "Open the door, Mr. Harper." Luke's grip tightened around the wrench. He wasn't opening that door. And whoever stood outside seemed to realize it because the voice shifted lower, colder. "You have something that doesn't belong to you." Luke stepped backward toward Mia's room, pulse hammering. The moment stretched thin, a wire pulled taut. Then the stranger tried the doorknob. That was the breaking point. Luke knew when that handle shook, when the doorframe creaked, when his daughter's frightened breath hitched behind him, that whatever was coming next would force him to do what he'd spent years avoiding. He was going to have to fight his way out of this. And the man outside had just made the first move. The doorknob rattled again, harder this time. Like the man outside wasn't checking anymore, he was deciding. Luke stepped back into the hallway, keeping his body between the door and Mia's bedroom. He could hear his daughter breathing fast, trying to stay quiet. "Mr. Harper," the voice said low and steady. "Open it now, or I will." That was it. A line drawn. Crossed. Luke's hand tightened on the wrench until his knuckles ached. He knew deep in the instinctive part of his brain, honed long before bus repairs, that the man wasn't here to talk and he wasn't federal anything. No Fed tried a doorknob before showing a badge. No agent tried to corner a child through intimidation. A soft click sounded from the front porch. Metal. Not the knob. Something else. Something worse. Luke whispered, barely audible. "Mia, go to the closet. Get in and shut the door. Don't come out until I call you." She grabbed his sleeve. "Dad." He squeezed her hand once. Now. Her small footsteps hurried across her bedroom carpet, then the soft thud of the closet door closing. The house fell into a terrible stillness. Seconds later, the stranger at the door muttered something under his breath. A shadow shifted. Luke recognized the rhythm instantly, a body bracing to kick the door in. He moved. The kick hit the door just as Luke threw his weight behind the heavy oak cabinet beside the entryway. The cabinet toppled with a crash, slamming flush against the interior of the door, barricading it, just as the frame groaned in protest. The man outside cursed sharply. Luke didn't wait for a second try. He darted to the back of the house, yanked open the basement door, and hit the lights. He knew those men would breach the front sooner or later. He needed time. Distance. A plan. The basement was cluttered with toolboxes, old baby stuff he hadn't had the heart to toss, Mia's forgotten science projects, and shelves, stacked with winter coats. But there was one thing down here no one in Riverbend knew existed, not even Mia. In the far corner behind the furnace, he pulled a dusty tarp aside and revealed a steel case the size of a small suitcase. Military issue. Sealed. Untouched since he'd left active duty and promised his wife he'd never be that man again. He punched in a code he never forgot. The lid opened with a hiss. The gear inside was old, but reliable. A tactical belt, 2 high-output LED flares, a compact breaching tool, noise-canceling earplugs, and a hardened tablet with offline encryption software from his convoy security days. Luke grabbed everything he could carry. He didn't want a fight, but if a fight came, he would not lose it, not with his daughter in the next room. Above him, the front door shook again harder, wood splintering. A heavy body slammed into it. Once, twice. He moved fast. He headed back upstairs and peeked through the side window. 2 dark SUVs sat on the street. Engines running. Men waiting. Not federal. Not local. Hired. A third man moved from the porch to the window, pulling out a tool to pry it open. Luke stepped back and whispered to himself, "Enough." He turned off the lights, cut through the kitchen, and went to the mudroom. Behind a row of boots, he pulled up the trap door. Nothing fancy, just a concealed crawl space he had built after a break-in years ago. It wasn't big, but it opened under the backyard deck. He crawled in the flares in one hand, the drive and tablet in the other. Before he closed the trap door, he looked toward Mia's room. He whispered, barely audible, "Hold on, baby. I'm coming back for you. I promise." Then he dropped into darkness. Crawling out from under the deck, he stayed low behind the overgrown shrubs. The yard was dim, the only light coming from the next street over. He could hear the men inside the house now. Front door smashed in boots, running voices sharp and frustrated. Good. He slung the tactical belt around his waist, clipped in the flares, and moved along the shadowed side of the house, every step quiet. He couldn't save Mia by hiding. He couldn't outrun SUVs. He needed to flip the power dynamic, turn the hunters into prey. And somewhere in his bones, in the place where the army had carved muscle memory into him, he felt the old gears turning. He hadn't wanted this life back, but his daughter was upstairs, alone, scared. And that meant the old Luke, the one he thought he buried, was done staying buried. He reached the side of the garage where the breaker box sat, yanked it open, pulled every switch. The entire block went dark. A shout rose from inside the house. Another man came around the back, pointing a flashlight beam along the fence line. Luke waited until the beam swung past him, then reached into his belt and snapped one of the LED flares. A burst of blinding white light flooded the yard. The man swore, stumbling backward, throwing an arm over his eyes. Luke was already moving not toward the man, but toward the shed behind the garage. He slipped inside, grabbed the thick chain he used for towing heavy equipment, and darted back out. He moved low fast, silent. The blinded man staggered near the side gate. Luke looped the chain around the man's legs and pulled hard. The man hit the dirt with a thud. The flashlight skittered across the lawn. Before he could shout, Luke was on him. One arm pinned, one knee pressing down. Just enough pressure to stop him, not enough to kill him. "Where's your unit leader?" Luke growled quietly. The man choked out. Inside. Upstairs, looking for the kid. A cold, murderous calm washed over Luke. He didn't reply. He knocked the man unconscious with the heel of his palm, grabbed the flashlight, and sprinted back toward the house. Inside, he could hear the intruders searching room to room. Furniture crashed. Doors slammed. Someone cursed as they kicked over a table. And somewhere above it all, faint and terrified, did Mia. The world narrowed. Luke charged. The back door wasn't locked. The men had used it to enter. He slipped inside silently. The house was pitch black. Perfect. He moved through the dark like he never stopped training. Every footstep measured, every breath controlled, every shadow a friend. He heard a voice at the top of the stairs. "Check the closet. She's got to be in there." Luke didn't hesitate. He pulled the second LED flare from his belt. This one wasn't for blinding. This one was for flooding the whole house with sudden, overwhelming light. He braced behind the staircase and cracked it open. A shockwave of bright white light erupted, bouncing off walls, slicing through the darkness. Upstairs, the intruders cursed, stumbling back. Luke sprinted up the stairs 2 at a time. At the top, one man shielded his eyes, gun drawn. Luke struck, before the man could even see him, disarming him with a quick twist, then slamming an elbow into his ribs. The second man lunged. Luke grabbed a lampshade off the nightstand and smashed it into the man's face, then kicked him down the hall. He rushed to Mia's room. She was curled in the closet, hands over her ears, tears streaming. "Daddy," she sobbed. He lifted her into his arms, holding her tight. I'm here, sweetheart. You're okay." Behind him, a slow clap echoed from the hallway. Luke turned. A figure stood at the far end, taller, older, sharper than the others. Not a hired thug. Someone in charge. Someone studying him. "Well," the man said lightly, "that was impressive." Luke shifted Mia behind him. "You shouldn't have come here." The man smiled faintly. "And you shouldn't have opened that toolbox." Luke's blood went cold. He knew. They knew. Mia clung to him, shaking. Luke took a breath. A deep, grounding breath. The kind he used to take before stepping into live fire back in Afghanistan. The kind his wife used to whisper into his ear when he thought he couldn't make it through another day. The kind that reminded him of the promise he made the night she died. Take care of Mia. Always. He lowered her gently onto the bed. "Sweetheart, crawl under. Don't move." She obeyed, without question. The man at the end of the hall tilted his head. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Just give us the drive." Luke didn't answer. He stepped forward, slowly, deliberately, choosing the moment the way a man chooses his last card in a losing hand. The man smirked. "You really want to do this?" "No," Luke said quietly. "But you came into my home, and you frightened my daughter. There's no going back from that." He moved. Fast. Faster than the man expected. The hall was narrow, which worked in Luke's favor. The man tried to raise his weapon, but Luke slammed into him, shoulder first, pinning the man against the wall. The gun fired once wild, blowing a picture frame to pieces. Luke wrenched the weapon free, dropped it, and used the breaching tool on his belt, bringing it down hard across the man's arm, then knee, then shoulder. The man collapsed. Luke stood over him, breath ragged but steady. "This is your only warning," he said quietly. "Tell your people to leave Riverbend, and if you come near my daughter again..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The man looked up, dazed, afraid for the first time. Luke didn't wait for backup. He grabbed Mia, hurried downstairs, and stepped out into the night, just as sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Someone had called the cops. Good, because now everyone would see what he'd done, what he could do, what he was a father who'd do anything to protect his child. As he walked into the flashing red and blue lights, holding Mia tight, the first officer on scene froze mid-sentence. "Jesus, Harper, what happened in there?" Luke didn't answer, not yet. But the power dynamic had shifted. The hunters were wounded. The truth was coming. And the quiet mechanic from Riverbend had just proved he was far more than anyone thought. The real reckoning was about to begin. Officer Daniels stared at Luke, like he couldn't quite reconcile the bleeding man in front of him with the same quiet mechanic who'd fixed his squad car heater last winter. The lights from the cruisers painted Luke and Mia in pulses of red and blue, their shadows stretching long across the lawn. "Harper, what in God's name?" Luke held up a hand. "I need Mia checked first." Daniel swallowed hard, nodded, and motioned another officer over. Mia clung to Luke's neck before letting herself be lifted away, trembling, but breathing steady. She kept her eyes locked on her father, as if afraid he'd disappear if she blinked. Medics arrived, stepping carefully around broken glass, and the unconscious man chained near the side gate. More officers poured in, weapons drawn, unsure what they were walking into. Inside the house, someone shouted, "Clear!" Another room, another clear. Luke stood still, every muscle tight. He'd gone through dozens of situations worse than this overseas, but he had never done anything like it with his child in the next room. That difference hit him like a brick. Harper. Daniels touched his arm gently. "You're hurt." Luke glanced at the scrape across his cheek, the bruising on his ribs, the cuts on his knuckles. He hadn't even felt them until that moment. "I'm okay." But Daniels didn't believe him. Nobody on scene did. This wasn't the Luke Harper they knew, the man who quietly clocked in, replaced brake pads, and picked up his daughter from school with a lunchbox dangling from his hand. This Luke moved like he'd been born in chaos. A medic approached. "Sir, we need to take a look at—" "Not yet," Luke said firmly. "I need to talk to—" "I," Shout interrupted him. "Got another one?" Officers dragged a half-conscious man out of the hallway, his nose broken, one arm hanging limp. He took one look at Luke and flinched, tried to pull away like a dog avoiding the person who'd kicked it. Everyone noticed. Daniels turned slowly toward Luke. "What in the hell did you do to these men?" Luke's jaw clenched, but before he could answer, the tall man from upstairs, the one who had ordered them to search for Mia, was brought out on a stretcher. His eyes rolled open, then fixed on Luke, with a mixture of fury and disbelief. "That man," he croaked, pointing a shaking finger, "is not who you think he is." Daniels frowned. What's that supposed to mean? But the man was wheezing now, drifting in and out. Luke looked away. He wasn't ready for this. Not here. Not with Mia scared and shaking on the curb. But fate, like it had all week, didn't care what Luke was ready for. As paramedics loaded the injured men into ambulances, the maroon sedan from earlier reappeared, easing past the cruisers. The driver stepped out, a woman in her 50s, with silver-streaked hair, wearing a windbreaker with a government crest stitched near the collar. She flashed a badge to the officers. They stepped aside quickly. Daniels stiffened. "Can I help you, ma'am?" Her eyes locked on Luke. "Yes. I'm here for him." Luke felt the shift instantly, a cold ripple through the yard. Every cop, every medic, even the neighbors who'd come out to stare, all eyes turned to him. Mia scrambled back to her father and pressed her face into his side. The woman approached. "Mr. Harper, we need to talk." "No." Luke stepped back protectively, shifting Mia behind him. "Who are you, Special Agent Karen Ridley, Department of Health and Human Services Office of Inspector General?" She held the badge steady. "We oversee federal healthcare fraud, whistleblower claims, and high-level medical privacy violations." Luke said nothing. Agent Ridley lowered her voice. 3 nights ago, a high-ranking employee from Ascension Health Analytics went missing after reporting unauthorized access to pediatric medical data across several states. The words hit Luke like a hammer. Pediatric. Medical data. Unauthorized access. He didn't need the rest of the sentence. Ridley continued. "She broke protocol and tried to contact the public directly. Dangerous move in her situation. We've been trying to locate her ever since." Daniels looked between Ridley and Luke. "Wait. What does this have to do with Harper?" Ridley turned fully to Luke now. "Because she made contact with you." Luke exhaled slowly. "Why would she pick me?" Ridley held his gaze. "Because she knew your name before she vanished." Silence fell over the yard, thick and heavy. Laramie, Luke's supervisor, had arrived in his sweatpants, alerted by the commotion. He stood off to the side, arms folded, ready to judge, to scold, to assume the worst. Ridley reached into her jacket and pulled out a folded document. She left a note. Ridley said, "Just one sentence." Luke didn't reach for it, but the agent unfolded it anyway and read aloud. "Give it to Luke Harper. He'll know what to do." Every officer turned toward him. His world tilted. He didn't know this woman. He didn't know why she trusted him. But she'd said those same eyes haunted Bloodshot had seen something monstrous. Daniels looked stunned. "Harper, you know her?" "No," Luke said. Ridley watched him carefully. "But she knew you, and she knew your background." Laramie snorted. "Background? He's a bus mechanic." Ridley shot him a look so sharp it cut the air. "Mr. Harper wasn't always a mechanic." Daniels blinked. "Is this about his military service?" The DD-214 said, "combat engineer." Ridley shook her head. "Not just combat engineer." She stepped closer, lowered her voice. Addressed only Luke. "You were assigned to tactical services, embedded data security liaison. You handled encrypted transfers in conflict zones. You protected whistleblowers being extracted from government contractors." Luke felt heat tighten his throat. He had spent years burying that past so deeply it might as well have been in another life. He did it for Mia. He did it for the promise he made to his wife. But Ridley wasn't wrong. Daniels looked flustered. "Harper, why didn't you say anything?" Luke didn't raise his voice, because it wasn't anyone's business. Ridley unfolded another document, a photo clipped to a report. 3 months ago, she said, Ascension Health Analytics launched a secret program using predictive modeling on children's medical records. No consent. Totally illegal. The woman you met, her name is Dr. Lauren Wade. She found evidence the company was misusing those records for clinical trials they never disclosed. The memory hit Luke, her bare feet in the grocery aisle, blood on her collar, the tremble in her hands. Ridley went on. They wiped her from the system, called her unstable, claimed she was a security threat. And then they sent people after her. Daniel's eyes widened. "Same people who broke into Harper's home," Ridley nodded. "Almost certainly." Then she fixed her gaze on Luke. "And she trusted you with the evidence." Laramie barked a laugh. "This is insane." "Harper, come on." Ridley turned slowly toward him. "Do you know how many civilians could have survived a coordinated home invasion with professional contractors? 1 out of maybe 50. Harper neutralized 3 of them without firearms in an enclosed home layout. That's not luck. That's training." Laramie's face paled. Daniels looked at Luke like seeing him for the first time. So Ridley continued, "Mr. Harper. Where is it?" Luke stayed silent. Mia squeezed his hand. Ridley softened. "I'm not here to arrest you. I'm here to protect you. And her." She nodded toward Mia. "Because Ascension knows exactly where you live now. They won't stop." Luke knew that. He'd felt it the moment the door splintered. Daniels cleared his throat awkwardly. "Harper, whatever this is, we're behind you." Even Laramie muttered, Yeah. Just tell us what you need." The garage men who'd whispered about veteran trouble the day before stared at Luke with a seriousness they'd never shown him once in all the years he'd worked beside them. A strange, quiet weight settled over the yard. They believed him now. They feared him a little. But more than anything, they respected him. Ridley closed the distance between them. "I need that drive, Mr. Harper. It's not safe with you." Luke looked down at Mia. Her cheeks streaked with tears, fingerprints of dust on her pajama sleeves, and something in him hardened. He wasn't handing anything over until he knew she'd be safe. Ridley seemed to read his hesitation. "You don't have to trust me," she said, "but you'll need help. Real help. Because what Dr. Wade discovered, it goes deep. And the people behind it won't stop at your door. They'll come for anyone connected to you. Your daughter, your sister, anyone. Luke exhaled slowly. "What are you asking?" he said. Ridley lifted her chin. "We want you to join the Protective Task Group. Help us finish what Dr. Wade started. You're the only one who's seen her, the only one who's fought the people chasing her, and the only one she explicitly named." Laramie sputtered. "He can't just leave his job." Ridley didn't even look at him. "He won't be working for you anymore." Daniel spoke up quietly. "Harper, this could blow the whole thing wide open." Mia tugged on Luke's sleeve. "Dad, will this make the bad people stop coming?" He knelt down so he was eye level with her. "It will," he said gently. "But I need to finish something. Something important. For all the other kids those people hurt." Her eyes filled, but she nodded. He stood. Ridley waited. Luke finally said, "Then tell me where we start." Ridley didn't smile, but her eyes softened. "We start by getting you two somewhere safe. Then we hunt." Luke slipped an arm around Mia, holding her securely, protectively. The night air was cold, the sirens fading as paramedics pulled away. Officers continued sweeping the house, the yard, the alley behind it. Neighbors whispered from their porches, stunned. Luke Harper, quiet mechanic, widowed, father, veteran. No one ever asked about, stood in the center of it all, like a storm had just passed through him, instead of around him. This wasn't his life yesterday, but it was now. And as Ridley motioned toward her car, setting everything in motion, Luke felt the shift deep in his bones. The truth was out. The tables had turned, and the people who once underestimated him were now looking to him to lead. By the time the sun broke over Riverbend the next morning, Luke and Mia were already gone. Quietly moved by Ridley's team before reporters, neighbors, or anyone connected to Ascension could latch on to their names. Word spread through the town anyway. Folks at the transit depot showed up to work, whispering about Harper taking down 3 armed men and the feds asking him for help. Even Laramie stood at the garage doorway that morning with a blank stare, rubbing his jaw, like a man suddenly questioning every assumption he'd ever made about someone he thought he understood. The 3 men arrested at Luke's house were booked on federal charges before lunchtime. Their mugshots made the evening news. Ascension Health Analytics released a panicked statement denying involvement, then within hours found itself under a full-scale investigation. And somewhere between those headlines, Riverbend realized that the quiet, widowed mechanic who'd kept to himself had risked everything to protect not just his daughter, but countless kids whose names he didn't even know. No one said it out loud, but the shift was unmistakable. Luke Harper wasn't invisible anymore. For the first time in years, people looked at him with something other than pity or casual dismissal. They looked at him with awe, with respect, with the uneasy understanding that they never really knew the man in the Navy work shirt who changed brake pads and fixed thermostats like it was nothing. The next days passed in a blur, briefing sworn statements, encrypted transfers, and hours spent working side by side with Agent Ridley's team. Mia stayed near him through all of it, clutching her stuffed dolphin and watching everything with wide, discerning eyes. Whenever she grew frightened or tired, Luke scooped her into his lap and reminded her they were almost through the worst of it. The drive, Dr. Lauren Wade's final lifeline, was no longer a burden Luke carried alone. It became the center of a sweeping federal case. Ridley kept him in the loop, asking him to consult on evidence handling and personal safety logistics, a role she insinuated he was uniquely qualified for. "You didn't just react," she told him quietly one evening. You strategized. And you protected your daughter with more discipline and clarity than most trained agents could have managed. Luke didn't know what to say to that. He just nodded and watched Mia draw little hearts on the edge of her notebook. By the end of the month, Ascension's CEO resigned. Several executives went into hiding. Congress announced hearings. Dr. Wade resurfaced under federal protection, offering testimony through secure channels. When she learned Luke had been the one to safeguard her evidence, she asked Ridley to pass along a message. Tell him thank you. Tell him he saved more lives than he'll ever meet. Those words settled into Luke's chest like something heavy and healing all at once. He didn't return to the transit depot. He couldn't not after everything. But he didn't have to. Ridley sat across from him in a quiet office overlooking the river and said, "Your skill set is rare. Your temperament even rarer. We could use you. Not full-time. Flexible work. Consulting. Helping whistleblowers get out safely. Helping families who can't protect themselves." Mia was sitting beside him, swinging her legs, listening. Luke asked, "Would it take me far from home?" Ridley shook her head. "Only as far as you're willing to go." He took the job. And for the first time in a long time, something in him clicked back into place. Not the soldier he used to be, not the grieving husband he had been, but a quiet, steady version of both. A man who could fix things bigger than engines. Months passed, then nearly a year. The hearings concluded. Criminal charges expanded. Families whose children's records had been stolen received settlement fund letters. And sometimes when Luke attended a meeting with Ridley's team, he'd pass the same people who once brushed past him at the grocery store, and they'd stop to shake his hand. Riverbend, small as it was, had a long memory, and it remembered who had stepped up when the danger came home. Mia thrived. She slept again without checking the locks twice. She joined a robotics club. She painted a picture of their old house, still cracked in places from that night, and titled it, "Safe Now." Luke hung it in the new living room of their new house, a little farther from the main road with thicker doors and a yard big enough for Mia to ride her bike. Sometimes at night, after Mia fell asleep, Luke would sit on the back porch and listen to the wind move through the maple trees. The world felt different now, not because it had gotten safer, but because he'd stopped hiding from what he was capable of. One warm evening, as fireflies floated over the lawn, Mia curled beside him on the porch swing. "Dad," she asked quietly, "are you done fighting now?" He slipped an arm around her shoulders. "I hope so," he said. "But if someone needs help, we help." She nodded against his side. "I like that." He kissed the top of her head. "I learned it from your mom," he added softly. And he meant it. A new message buzzed on his phone, Ridley sending over a small case about a clinic in Kentucky, where a doctor had finally worked up the courage to report wrongdoing. Luke didn't sigh. He didn't tense. He just read it, nodded to himself, and turned the phone face down. Mia whispered, "Will you always come home, always?" he said. And he meant that too. As the sun dipped below the trees and the porch light hummed on, Luke closed his eyes for a moment, letting the peace settle in. Peace he'd earned. Peace he had fought for. Peace he had built with his own 2 hands. In the end, he wasn't a hero because he won a fight. He was a hero because he refused to look away when it would have been easier. And sometimes that's all courage really is, doing what's right even when no one's watching yet, especially then.